Hi, I'm Curtis Thompson. Welcome to 320 Workshops. Today's project is this dresser. While it probably looks okay on camera, it's really been treated to that nasty plastic varnish treatment. And so it needs to be stripped off and refinished. It's got some veneer issues here and there and some scuffs and bangs that we'll take care of. The brasses probably could be polished up a little bit, and the drawers don't open very easily, so that can be fixed. While it's not a terribly old dresser, it is a nice looking dresser, and we're going to see what we can do with it. All right, so before we get started stripping the dresser, I want to talk a little bit about the products I've used. And I've used this citrus strip and clean strip, probably the clean strip mostly over the last few years. Never been tremendously happy with either one. They do the job, but it does seem to take multiple applications. Over the last years, they took out the harsh chemicals that were dangerous to our bodies, which I appreciate they did that, but it really does reduce its effectiveness on taking the finish off, which makes sense. So I was at a local paint store here in Ashland, Virginia called RVA Paints, Paint and Decorating, rvapaints.com. And I was talking to Dale there about my frustration with the fact that strippers just don't seem to take off like they used to. And he said he used this Cuts-It brand, and he carried it in the store there, and recommended it. So I thought I'd try it and see what happens. And I didn't want this to be a review of products, but then I thought it's not really fair to try that on this, which has kind of a newer, heavier finish than I typically am removing. So I thought, okay, we'll do a little bit of a head-to-head. Not necessarily a scientific comparison, but I'm going to take 3 drawers, and I'm going to strip them, each one with a different product, and see if there's any difference in them, and I'll let you know what I think. I really appreciated Dale's input on this. One of the things I really like about shopping locally is the people there really do care about what you're doing and hoping to keep you successful. So we'll see how that does, and we'll compare the products and see how we get along. All right, so we'll get started here. The first product we're going to try is the citrus strip. Now I'm doing it first because the only difference in the instructions of these is that the citrus strip calls for it to set on the finish for 30 minutes. The other two say 15 minutes, which is, other than that, they're all about the same. I'm going to apply it on, and we'll let them set for the amount of time they say, and then I'll strip them off. So, word about safety, I've got rubber gloves, a respirator, safety glasses, indoors working in my workshop. So I've got the garage door cracked open, the window open, and a fan blowing to keep the air circulating through here, just in case there's any harsh chemicals that I don't want to breathe or get on me. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get started. All right, drawer number 2, I'm going to do with Clean Strip, which is the product that I'm most familiar with. And now the Cuts-It. Now, we'll say the one big difference that I noticed right away was the Cuts-It is a much thinner product, and it does recommend for horizontal surfaces. So that's a bit of a difference between the 3. All right, so now I have the 3 products on. I'm going to wait 15 minutes to start stripping the 2 drawers that call for 15, and then we'll pull the citrus strip, which calls for 30 minutes, off last, and we'll see how we get along. All right, so all 3 drawers have now dried for probably about a half an hour. And
I'm looking at them and trying to see where the differences are. All three products did strip off a good bit of the finish. Interestingly, that there's kind of like unique differences. So let's start off with the cut set, which is this drawer. Now, what you'll see is it did take off a good bit of finish. There is some still remaining. And the remaining, you can probably see from the reflection, it almost looks like it didn't do anything with that. Well, this is stripped off pretty good. I'd say there's probably the most finish removed from the cut set. Now, the clean strip, it has almost as much removed. Not I'd say the cut set still has the amount of finish removed the most. But this one, it does seem to be maybe a little bit more on the stuff that did remove, a little bit more impacted, but not greatly. So I just find that interesting that what didn't come off doesn't look like it was impacted much at all. Then the clean strip, or the citric strip. Now this one, it did take off a lot of finish, but it raised the grain a good bit, and it doesn't feel, I don't know, it doesn't feel quite as complete as the other. While it at the first glance looks like maybe more finishes come off, I think there's probably more work to be done on this one than the others. You can see up at the other end there is some shiny finish. That's the easiest way to see it. But I would say that any one of these three products work really, really well. But I think the cut set probably gets the most off. I like the way it comes off. The clean strip probably slightly less than the cut set. And the citric strip, while it removed it, I'm just not overly pleased with the ending result. We'll have to see after we sand and everything if there's much difference at that point. But all of them are going to need some more finish removed.
So let's discuss the products. What we have is three products that I tried. So the citric strip, the cut set, and the clean strip. All of these three products worked fairly well. I would say equally well, and you would be fine using any one of these products. Now, the test that I did was obviously not a scientific test. I was working on one piece of furniture. It had one set of circumstances with the finish that was on it. It was a more modern piece of furniture, so you know, it's probably a stronger finish for wear. It also had been covered with another varnish at some point in time. It almost acted like a spar varnish or a marine varnish. It just had that real thick, heavy plastic look. Could have been a polyurethane, I don't know. They all three, when it bubbled up similarly. None of them took it all off on the first try. So I did have a fourth product that I hesitated using, but this is a more modern piece of furniture. This cut set says for antiques, furniture, and fine wood, so that's why I was leaning towards this. However, when I was having so much trouble getting anything off, I did resort back to another product by this Savagoran, and I apologize, I'm probably not saying it correctly. It's called Super Strip. It's called a heavy-duty stripper for wood, metal, auto, masonry, and marine. So I thought I'd try this. Now, I did use it a little bit differently. I did follow some of the instructions. Well, I followed the instructions, but some of the steps that were a little bit different. One of the things it said was to cover it with plastic if you needed to. What I found was this stuff evaporated really, really fast. So when I would put some on, it was already evaporated off by the time I got to the other end of the piece. So I did start using a piece of plastic over that, and you'll see that in some of the video. But this was a little bit more thick. Still says for horizontal surfaces. I used this on the sides and the top on a second go. and covered it with the plastic, let it go 15 minutes, and it did take the finish off a bit better. I would say this was a lot stronger product and did remove it. Now, whether I'd want to use this on an antique piece of furniture or not, I don't know yet. That would be another question. Again, not a scientific experiment. So those are the products. I would say any one of the three were good. This clean strip had the advantage of it's thick and you can use it on a vertical surface. The citric strip worked equally as well as far as being thick and working on vertical surfaces. However, the one thing I really don't like about this is it really raised the grain, and it didn't seem to, like, it would move the finish, but it seemed like it was leaving some of it back. Maybe that was because the grain was raised and it just felt that way. I don't know. But it works. In a pinch, I'd use this. That's not my favorite. The Cut-It worked really, really well. Equally well as this, but it was thin, so it did have the disadvantage of having to work on horizontal surfaces. I would say of the three I tested, number 4 was the one I would probably choose to use again. Both good products, but this one had the advantage of it was a little stronger. Again, don't know if I'd use it on a real valuable antique piece of furniture. The other thing I wanted to bring up is all of these, we wiped them down with mineral spirits after we're done. And then also, I used a TSP substitute. You can't buy trisodium phosphate anymore, so they had these substitutes. This product, picked it up at the big box store, worked extremely well. The thing with TSP is that once you've cleaned everything off and you've done all that and you wash it with this, you are going to get an immense amount of color still off. It's surprising how much color will come off with this TSP. And it does seem to clean it and give it a nice finish for the next step. So that's my results. Hopefully that helps.
Now that I've completed the testing, let's go back to the beginning and see how I restored this dresser. I don't know if it really makes any difference, but I like to start off by scrubbing everything down with a degreaser and getting all the polishes and off. Seems like it makes the strippers work a little bit better, but this may be an unnecessary step. So I need to take all the hardware off so I can get those cleaned up. I'll soak those while I'm stripping the rest of the furniture. As you can probably tell, this has already been stripped once with the Cut-It product, and it did leave some residual finish, so I am doing it again with the super strip. Now you see I'm using the instructions to put plastic over it. Then after 15 minutes, it kept it from evaporating. So it did seem to really then take a lot of the finish off. You can see some there at the bottom, still on there. But for the most part, it all came off. So once I wiped it down with mineral spirits, got a little bit more off, and then I continued on with scraping it. So now once we've got all the stripping, chemical stripping done, we'll give it some sanding. You can see a little bit there at the bottom. I was still kind of sanding off. Sand all the different pieces. Now we'll get ready to put the finish on it. So first thing I like to do is vacuum it good on the outside and on the inside to get any dust off. Then use a tack cloth, continue to unroll it to expose new sides. That gets all the sand or the dust off of it. Now I'm sealing this with a pre-mixed shellac sealer, and I did cut that a little bit with some more alcohol. You can see pretty well here that the legs are made of poplar, so I'm going to have to work with staining those a little bit darker to match. And for some reason I failed to film the stain, but here I'm putting on the clear finish. I'm using Osmos hard wax oil, and I like the product. It's very sturdy. It'll hold up to the wear and tear. And I'm putting on with the rag, getting it on all the pieces. I don't like a film finish, so this gives a nice durable finish without that plastic look. Now there are a couple places at the back of the top that the veneer had been broken off. So here I'm just kind of testing, see how hard it's stuck. I'm trimming it off at an angle. I don't like to use like straight 90-degree angles on it. It seems to show up a little bit more. So I'm cutting this off at a slight angle to try and get all that off. Now I'm just using a chisel to pull it up. And it comes up pretty easy here. Now I decided to hide what I was doing with my hand. Sorry about that. Now what I want to do is I want to match the grain in the veneer that I'm going to replace it with so that it's going in the same direction. And now I use a piece of masking tape that I'll kind of to mark out the pattern, just rubbing the side of the edge with my pencil. Here again, trying to line up the grain. I'm just putting that piece of tape back on there as my pattern. And I'll get that cut out. Now I put a piece of tape on this to hold it in place so I can bend it back and get the glue put on everything. A little bit of hide glue. Put a caul on top of that and put the clamps on it overnight. Now, in the morning, I was able to take the clamps off. Now, just get those edges trimmed back.
sand it over a little bit so there's not a sharp edge. And I'm using my cutting block. That's a little bit of sandpaper on it. And wipe off any excess glue and get ready to add some stain to that. Now I'm using the same stain as I used on the rest of it to darken it in. Of course, this is new walnut, so I'm also using some spray toner to get the color match better. And this is just a little bit of trial and error. I'm using some Perfect Brown and some Van Dyke Brown Mohawk toner. And down at the other end of the table, I had another piece that I replaced. Use the same techniques as I did at the one I showed. Here's a couple shots of the finished results. I think they blended pretty nicely. I like to use a brush with some darker stain on it to continue the grain over the joint, just to kind of trick the eye that it's not there.
So what I'm doing now is I let these brasses soak in a Vapo-Rust overnight. Now this product doesn't seem to say it is to do work on brass, but it did say it wouldn't hurt brass or copper, so I thought, well, at least maybe get some of the stuff off of it, and it did. It really...
Now I'm going to take these, soak them in a little warm water to kind of clean off any of the remaining Vapo-Rust, and then I'll dry them off and give them a good coat of like a brass lacquer to protect them. Now I've sprayed them several coats of lacquer, and now it's just a matter of reassembling the pieces. They look a lot different than they did when I took them off. Now I'm going to use some Johnson's paste wax on the runners. They were all in pretty good shape. They weren't worn real bad. So I put some on each of the edges and in that center guide, and then a little bit on the center guide in the cabinet itself. And they seem to work a lot better.
Ooh. Now look what we got here. This is cracked.
Well, that's not a huge problem. I'm just going to put some glue inside there, shove it down into the crack, put a clamp on it. I am going to add another glue block along the side. You can see the one at the very top there is missing. So I just cut one out of a little piece of scrap wood and glued in place. And once that glue dried, I was able to get that drawer back in.
Well, there we are. Been putting this project off for a while, but when we decided to paint the bedroom, it was a good opportunity to get this out in the shop and give it a refinish. We took the varnish off, and now the walnut grain shows up a lot better. Fixed a couple pieces of veneer. Took the antiquing off the brasses so they're a bit brighter. Fixed the drawers, and I'm real pleased with the results. Now I've just got to finish up the bedroom and get a few more things done. So thanks for stopping by.